morning, everyone. My name is Sue. On behalf of the Goochland branch of the Pamunkey Regional Library, welcome to today's program, Winter Seed Sowing. Just want to start off by warning you that we have had some internet issues today. Hopefully we'll get through this without any hitch, but just want you to be aware of it. If anything happens, we'll be in touch to let you know what's going on. This presentation is part of the 2021 Horticultural Series developed in a partnership between the library and the Goochland Powhatan Master Gardener Association. We have two co-hosts today. First is Rachel Watman, who is a Goochland Powhatan Master Gardener Association volunteer. And today's presenter is Connie Sorrel. Connie is a member of the Goochland Powhatan Master Gardener Association and the Salisbury Garden Club in Midlothian. She joined the Master Gardener Volunteer Program in 2013 and has served in several leadership positions. Okay, let's get started. The chat feature is available, so please send us your questions. They will be addressed throughout the presentation. Here is Connie Sorrel with Winter Seed Sowing.
Good morning. Thank you, Sue. It's good to see everyone. On behalf of the Goochland Powhatan Master Gardeners Association, I want to thank you so much for being our partners in this program. This has just been a tremendous way for us to help fulfill our volunteer responsibilities to educate our community about horticultural practices. So with that, we're going to talk about something that I just have learned about in the last 2 years, and it's just been very exciting. Winter seed sowing, not so easy to say, winter seed sowing, is an easy germination method to start many seedlings for just pennies. It doesn't require any special equipment. During the winter, seeds are sown in little mini greenhouses that you make yourself from recycled plastic items like milk jugs or pop bottles or salad containers even. And after sowing, the mini greenhouse is placed outside to wait for the end of winter. So seeds can be started anytime between January and April. And actually they get watered mostly by the rainstorms and snow that happens over the winter. So the seeds germinate on their own and they harden off, the plants harden off on their own. So it's a pretty spectacular way to get your garden started much sooner, get a head start. So as you can see in this introductory picture, there are lots of different containers here. And so you can see the milk jugs, which I like using just because they're a little bigger and they're a little taller. But you can see here's some liter drink bottles. There's some salad containers here, but what I would suggest you do is you put two bottoms together to make it tall, because having a short lid on this really isn't going to work for very long once the seeds do start germinating and pop up. But the whole point is you can really make this a force multiplier in your garden. So let's get started. So why would we do this? So first of all, it can be done entirely outdoors, so you don't have to make any mess in your house to do this, and you get an easy head start, and you protect the seeds so that more germinate actually in this process. And you don't need any special soil, and you don't need to have sterilized soil. You don't need any special equipment. You don't need any lights or heating mats like you would if you were starting plants inside during the winter. And then, as I mentioned before, no hardening off is necessary because they're already outside adjusting to the weather. So it's inexpensive, it's green, it's a great way to recycle plastic containers. And as you'll see in the presentation, it's very easy. So, basically what we're doing is we're creating mini greenhouses, and the seeds are going to go through a natural cycle of cold stratification as the freeze and thaw cycles of winter go along. So, so this is not winter seeding directly outside in the soil, like you might do for wheat or radishes. So when do we want to start doing that? Here in this area of Virginia, we're in agricultural zone 7A. So January to March is the best time. I have started some seeds as late as the end of February, and I still had some very nice sized plants come the 1st of May after the last frost hit to plant in my garden. So, you know, instead of starting seeds after the last frost, I'm putting plants out, which is really a nice feature. So obviously you want to follow the instructions, look at your seed package for your germination rates. Because you don't want them to get too terribly big while they're in this greenhouse environment. And I would just mention that native seeds do especially well. So if you're into flower gardening and you like native plants, they do especially well in seed sowing like this. So what do you need? I have a little picture over here of some of my things I can hold up. So first of all, you need a milk jug. And so here's one that I've already cut open. And you'll need some, once you cut it using either scissors or a box cutter. Even though I've done it with scissors, my little box cutter is much more easy to use. But as you'll notice, I kept the hinge on. I didn't cut it completely so that when I open it up, I can close it back up easily with the hinge that I've made on there. So also I needed my little handy dandy drill, one of my presents for my husband for my birthday one year. I love it. And I used this before I cut the jug. I made several holes around the top and also in the bottom. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And then in my picture, you'll see that I happen to have just a bag of organic potting mixture, but you don't need organic soil. I definitely would not recommend using seed starter. Just plain old garden soil potting mix works just fine. And you'll need some water. And also, don't use a regular Sharpie for marking the outside of your container, because that usually doesn't last through the winter. So I've discovered that actually Sharpie makes, and there are other companies that make these paint markers, and they last a lot longer. And so I use this on the outside so I can easily look at my collection. I usually have about 12 or 15 of these little jugs that I do during the winter. So I can easily look and see which ones are my tomatoes, which one are my parsley, which one are my flower plants. But then I also use some little markers. And so, you know, you can either go to the store and buy some of these plastic markers, or you can take an old blind and cut out little slats from little mini binds and use those for markers, or even popsicle sticks. So, and what we're going to do with these is we're going to put them inside before we close up the container. So just in case the outside markings disappear over the winter weather, when we open it up, we still know what we've got. So very, very important. So let's go on. So a little bit about what seeds to sow. Obviously, things that say winter seeding or directly sow out in the fall, cold strat. Yes. Did someone have a question?
No, I think there was an audio issue, but it's good now.
Oh,
thank you.
Okay, great. So all of these are great clues for looking for this on your seed package, but not all seed packages have this. But this is especially helpful when you do have this. So you can see here, I have examples of two packages. One is Heliopsis, a false sunflower, and the other is actually a button bush, which is you know, a shrub that can be started through this process. So one of the things that I always have trouble with is I have a tendency to throw in more seeds than I really should. And so I would strongly suggest you pay attention to not putting too many seeds in, because otherwise, once they start sprouting, you're going to have to open up the mini greenhouse and start pinching them to reduce them, because otherwise, if there are too many seeds trying to germinate, you won't get a good root system. So that's a lesson I had to learn the hard way. Okay, so one of the things that's really interesting here is, you know, you wouldn't necessarily think this jug, because it's not completely clear, would be a good candidate to use. But I've learned that there's this little thing called the thumb test. So if you see, I put my finger in there, you can see my finger through there. So as long as the container that you're using is translucent enough that you can see your thumb through it, you're good to go. So the other thing about this is you only need about 3 inches of soil. So for this container, you know, I would only fill it, you know, about half the distance that I've cut it open. And so one of the things you want to do, as I talked about, was cut it, you know, putting holes in the top so that it can breathe and so that water can get in it, and then put some drainage holes in the bottom so that if it does rain a lot, all that excess water will drain through. And what's really clever about this is take the cap off and throw it away. So because you want more water, and you want breathing to be going, you know, transpiration to be going on while they're sitting outside. So one thing I would say about moistening the soil is, you know, have the soil in another bucket and water it, but don't water it too much. Just water it enough so that when you have a fistful of it, you can't squeeze the water out of it. It'll hold together, but it won't be too wet. And then of course, put the dirt in, put your seeds in, and you might want, you know, some people use a pencil or a chopstick, you know, to make little holes sometimes, but you don't need to cover them very much. You really just need to make sure that they're in contact with the soil, have a good contact with the soil. And then last but not least, don't forget to put your marker in that has the name of the plant and the date you planted it. I find that's always a very helpful thing. So, and you can buy these paint marker places at lots of places, Walmart's, and, you know, Joann's, different places like that sell them. So, so one of the things that I'll remind you about is some seeds need what's called scarification. So what does that mean? It means it needs, you know, you need to take a file, and you can even do this with a nail file, or you can do it with a metal file, but some seeds have a very hard coating on the outside of them, but your seed package will tell you whether or not that particular seed needs to be scarified. And all that means is to scratch the surface so that you've broken through that covering, so the seed will germinate. And so you just sprinkle the seeds on top of the soil, make sure you haven't overseeded to overcrowd them. And sometimes for large seeds, you may have to put them in, you know, have a little more soil and put them into the soil just below the surface. So you can just sprinkle some soil over the seeds to just lightly cover them. And so then you take your duct tape and you seal it up, nice and tight all around, and stick it outside in the sun. I set mine out in my driveway where they get full sun. So I would say one thing you want to do after you've put them out is to keep an eye out to see that they get that condensation that greenhouses typically get. And if they don't, if they're looking kind of dry, you may want to drip some water through that opening on the top to get them some water if we were to particularly have a very dry season. So you don't want them to dry out completely. So you can usually tell when they're in need of a little water, but also water on the side of caution there so you don't overwater. So this is a great picture of all the containers all lined up, and look at all the different types of things that have been grown here. So the plants are large enough to transplant. Some plants could even start coming out of the hole of the jug. So that's one of the reasons why I say if you want to use the large plastic containers that salad comes in, make sure they're at least 3 or 4 inches deep, and then put 2 bottoms together and tape them together so that you have plenty of headroom for your plants. So when you're ready to open up the container, sometimes you might want to just add a little water to them. You can turn them over on their side and just let it come out as a block, and then gently pull them apart so that you can then plant them in your garden. Sometimes, depending on when you've started your plants, they might still be a little on the small side. So you may have to put them in a tray of some kind to let them keep growing a little bit before you put them out in the garden. But mostly I've had great success with taking the plants that I've grown in these little containers and just gently pulling them apart and putting them in my garden. So I want to make a little commercial here for why use native plants. I'm sure that some people have been hearing quite a bit about the fact that in many areas we have food deserts for insects and birds. And so most lawns are considered food deserts. So to the extent that we can add more native plants that will support the insect population, which in turn supports the bird population, that's something that as master gardeners we're trying to encourage. So this absolutely helps preserve the natural ecosystem. And so the other thing about native plants, that because they're used to growing here, this is their home, they require less supplemental water, fertilizer, and generally they don't need to have any pesticides on them. And some actually prefer our clay soil. So, so here you go. So at the end of this, here are several websites from which I gathered information for this presentation. And as you can see, several of them are extension offices, Pennsylvania Extension Service, Illinois, Maryland, and so even Oklahoma had a lot of good tips. When I mentioned earlier about the soil, I forgot to mention seed starting soil is really not a very good medium, even though I have read in a couple of places that people have used it. And the reason why it's not considered a very good soil medium is because it really doesn't have enough nutrients to get your plant through 2 or 3 months of the winter. So just plain old garden soil is the way to go. And also I would tell you that there are quite a lot of winter seed sowing sites on YouTube. So you can actually watch people on their homemade videos. There's a lady named who has Jen's Garden, who's one of many that have those presentations. Jen's Garden Journey, there it's listed there with a link to it. So are there any questions?
Connie, I just wanted to start by saying thank you so much. That was extremely informative and inspirational. I especially appreciated your level of detail and your tips that you wove in there throughout. Did you want to mention that you had a piece come out in the Goochland paper that
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, last week in the Goochland Gazette, they were kind enough to publish my article on winter seed sowing, and it's practically a full page because it's basically the script for this presentation. So if you really wanted to sit down, if you like reading through things, my article on seed sowing has all of the tips that we've talked about today in that article. So I'm sure the library might have some copies of it. And I'm also I've already sent to Sue a copy of my presentation, which they'll be able to put up on the library website. So if you want to go back through it and look at any of the tips, or you want to check out these websites, they'll be there on the library website.
Okay.
Thank you, Connie.
Yeah.
If anyone has a question, please feel free to raise your hand, or you can type that there in the chat.
We have one, here's a comment. Any thought of using natural compost mixed in with garden soil for seeds to grow into?
I've not done it. And in the articles, as you can see, I've read quite a bit about it. It didn't seem to be necessary. So I think that, if you just have good soil, if you're talking about using soil out of your yard, I just would make sure, as a master gardener, we always say, test your soil, test your soil, test your soil. So I would just make sure. I wouldn't want to make it too rich. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay. And another, does the size of holes in the container, which may affect condensation, affect environment for growing?
It doesn't seem to have. I'm thinking that I use a little drill bit that maybe makes 1/4 of an inch to 1/3 of an inch hole. And I usually put about 8 to 10. And then I usually put about 6 to 8 in the bottom. But I haven't noticed any particular secret to that.
Okay. Well, Connie, the library wants to thank you so much for your informative presentation. And we appreciate the time and effort you took to share your expertise. And if anyone continues to have questions while I'm going over a few things, please send them. Connie, as she said, she's is going to share her presentation slides with us. You can get them through the same page that you registered for this presentation. So you might find it helpful to have this list of resources. Also, if you want to view it again, or you know someone that wasn't able to participate today, it's accessible through our website. From the homepage, you can just click on the adult icon. And don't forget, the library has great resources for gardeners in its branches and through its digital library. Do we have any other questions?
Actually, can I ask, Connie, I saw in your picture, so you did have a number of containers in your driveway. In terms of placement, and I also saw the photo where they were just sitting in a bed of snow. Does it need to be closer to the house for warmth? It seems like you can put them anywhere outside.
No, as long as they're in full sun. So at my house, I have a lot of oak trees around my home. I don't have all that much sunny property. And so the sunniest place practically that has consistent sun during the day is on my driveway. And I just sit them out at the end of my driveway, and they're probably 20 feet from the house. So they didn't really need any special protection from wind or the weather. in any way. And I would mention, I think I might have skipped through one of my slides, that I've done herbs and flowers and some vegetables. It should be pretty obvious to say I didn't try and start any carrots by this method.
But one of our participants would like to know if you can really plant tomatoes in the winter.
Well, you can start the seeds. That's the whole point, is, you know, you can get the seeds started. I started some in late February, actually. And our first frost is typically between the 15th of April and the 1st of May. So I lean toward not setting things out until about the 1st of May. It always surprises me that greenhouses are selling all this stuff so early on, when it's really too early to plant a lot of things, particularly vegetables. But I had some nice little tomato plants, you know, 3 or 4 inches high, that were well on their way. And so if you particularly like different kinds of tomatoes, tomatoes that you can't get at Lowe's or the garden center, you know, this is a great way to have, to buy some heirloom seeds and try different kinds of tomatoes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I see that my friend Pat Lust is on here, and I know she is a great winter seed sower, and she grows shrubs and perennials and all kinds of things in her outdoor environment.
Okay.
Any other questions from the group?
Okay, well, today's program concludes our 2021 horticultural series, and we're glad to be able to share that we are going to continue to partner with the Goochland-Powhatan Master Gardener Association in 2022. We have several great topics lined up already for January, February, and March. So what a great day to spend a great way to spend a winter day. We hope you join us on Saturday, January 8th at 11 a.m. when Master Gardener Don Smith will talk about growing fruit trees in our region. So thank you everybody for joining us today. See you on January 8th, and thank you, Rachel and Connie.
Thank you, Sue.